Five Live Cricket Show.
Good evening, welcome to New Zealand. For the next 30 minutes here on 5 Live Sport, we'll be focusing on cricket and the Women's World Cup. We're just 5.5 hours away from England's semi-final against South Africa as these two sides bid to join Australia in Sunday's showpiece in Christchurch. We'll get on to Australia's massive win against West Indies in Wellington shortly, but let's start with England, the reigning champions from 2017, and a side who've had, I think it's fair to say, quite a roller coaster in this tournament. With me, Henry Moran, to look ahead to this England match against South Africa, the BBC's chief cricket writer, Stefan Schemmelt, and 2017 World Cup winner, Alex Hartley. Now, Stefan, first of all, when England lost that game against South Africa in the group stages, their third defeat in a row, we were wondering if they'd ever get to this point of a semi-final berth. They are there, the prize, 2 matches away. How do you think they'll be feeling?
Don't forget, it wasn't just 3 World Cup defeats, it was also a winless Ashes campaign. They looked like a cricket team that had just forgotten how to win. There were mistakes in the field, there were batting collapses, they were conceding too many runs, particularly through extras with the ball, and we really did think that England's World Cup defence was going to be over 2 weeks into this tournament. But they've managed to turn it round really well, actually, and I think that's a testament to the character in the team. 4 straight victories. I think Heather Knight, the captain, has played a big part in that by keeping so level-headed. There's been some excellent individual performances. Sophie Ecclestone is the leading wicket-taker in the tournament. Charlie Dean, the young off-spinner, has been a real find. Catherine Brunt seems to be coming into her own just at the right time of the tournament. Anya Shrubsole, such a big game player. She got them over the line against New Zealand in that 1-wicket heart-stopping victory. And then key batters seem to just be chipping in here and there. Nat Siver has been dependable throughout the tournament. Danny Wyatt and Sophia Dunkley have both got key half-centuries towards the back end of the group stage. As to how they're feeling, they'll be thinking like they can win the World Cup, simply because they've done it before. They know how to do it. They've been in this situation. Heather Knight herself said, look, the group stage counts for nothing now. We all start equally. It was 4 teams with 2 games to win the World Cup. Australia have already won their semi-final. England have got 2 games, 1 game to get there to play the Aussies, and then a final where anything could happen. As for the semi-final, it's the same opponents that they had 5 years ago in South Africa. They won a thrilling game. Everyone looks back at the 2017 World Cup and they just remember Anya Shrubsole at Lord's steaming down the hill to take those wickets. But the semi-final was just as dramatic. Will that count for anything? Heather Knight says it won't. It's got to count for something, though, hasn't it?
Well, Alex, you played in that game 5 years ago. You'll have, I'm sure, lots of memories from that occasion. How much of an impact does it make when South Africa, with lots of the same players, will be thinking back to that day in Bristol?
I think it affects South Africa more than it does England, to be completely honest. They'll have scars from that day. You know, there's the famous picture of Anya Shrubsole with her hand on the back of, you know, a couple of the South African players as they were absolutely devastated. They'd been knocked out of the World Cup with 2 balls to spare, or 1 ball to spare in the end. So there's scars there for South Africa. For England, it's a case of play a game, move on, win the final. That's what happened. You know, England won't necessarily reflect back on that semi-final because it wasn't their last game in the World Cup. The final was the last game, which ultimately they went on to win. So I think it's South Africa that will look back on that semi-final and go, let's not let that happen again. As England, it's just another cricket game.
England have had such a weird tournament, losing 3 matches, then winning 4. Every game has been a knockout, Alex, since that game against India, where they just had to win. They had no choice or they were going home. Does that help them? Because they have had this experience now of must-win cricket. Yeah,
I think it does help you to a certain degree. Not only did England have to win all their games, they were kind of relying on other results to go their way at one stage, and for some reason the cricket gods have been with them, and that's happened. They've won all their games. They played against India a few days after playing against South Africa and ended up winning by 4 wickets, and since then they've found ways to win. They had a nervy win against New Zealand where they tried to lose, but Anya Shrubsole again got England over the line with a cover drive past extra cover for 4. So it's been a strange old campaign for England, losing their first 3 games, but now they've won their next 4 going into the semi-finals. They'll be feeling pretty confident, but they still have things to work on.
Stefan, South Africa are ranked higher than England in the ICC rankings. Why, according to the bookies, are England favourites for this?
I'm not sure that the bookies have got that right. actually. And because South Africa, it's a remarkable story, the way that they have risen to be such a strong side in this tournament. The reason I say that is because I was at a warm-up game between these two sides back in Lincoln, what seems like a lifetime ago now. England wiped the floor with South Africa. Their top order reduced them to 19 for 3, I think, bowled them out for about 130. England chased it, no trouble at all. South Africa, they did have this position as the second-ranked team according to the ICC, but they were arriving at this tournament without Dane van Niekerk, their injured captain. Really inspirational, not only as a leader, but also as an all-rounder. And you looked at them going into this tournament thinking, well, they've just been hammered in the warm-ups. They haven't got Van Niekerk. How on earth are they going to get on? In their first game, they only just about limped past Bangladesh. They only just scraped past Pakistan as well. And you're thinking, South Africa, I'm not sure. But then they've beaten England. They beat India. They beat New Zealand as well. All of them really close finishes. That really stands them in good stead. And without Van Niekerk, they've had so many players step up. Sune Loose, the captain, 249 runs, has led them with a really calm head. Laura Wolfhard, 433 runs, is the leading run scorer in the tournament, 5 half-centuries. She's got a cover drive so beautiful you should frame it and hang it in the Louvre. And then the fast bowling department, Shabnem Ismail, Marizan Kapp, the all-rounder who's also got them over the line with the bat a couple of times, Ayagbonga Kaka, Mazabata Class, a fully rounded fast bowling attack. Player for player, if you were picking a composite side at the moment, at least on World Cup performances between England and South Africa, you might have more South Africa players than you had England. This is a really, really tough test for England. Do I think England will win it? Yeah, I will. Yes, I do. Having said all that about how strong I think South Africa are, because I do think England are peaking at the right time. But we've just seen Australia dismantle West Indies in a semi-final. It will not be like that in Christchurch.
How will England be viewing this, Alex? Will they look at themselves as favourites?
I think so. I think you have to back yourself. There's no point turning up if you don't think you're going to win. You might as well just pack your bags and go home. They'll be looking about like where they can get better as a team, but they'll also be looking at how they can capitalise on South Africa's bowling attack. And truth be told, it's their spin. You know, they've got average spinners of South Africa. They've got a very, very good seam attack, but the spinners in the captain Sune Lees and Chloe Tryon, it's not anything special. We've seen Sune Lees nearly bowl herself out of the World Cup with her trackers with her leg spin earlier on in the World Cup. I mean, it was dreadful to watch. And then you've got Chloe Tryon with her left arm spin, used to be a left arm seamer. England are so much stronger in the spin unit than South Africa, and they'll have to capitalise on that.
It feels like it's a new ball game, and what I mean by that is we've got Laura Wolfhard at the top of the order for South Africa, and Liz Ali, her opening partner. She's not fired yet, but she was the ICC Women's Cricketer of the Year last year, against this brilliant or experienced England new ball attack in Brunt and Shrubsole with the backup of Kate Cross and Nat Siver. Can England attack, strike early, get rid of Wolfhard, get rid of Liz Ali, because what comes after that for England, and Sophie Ecclestone and Charlie Dean have both been excellent. They're spinners. So England, if they can make early inroads into the South Africa top order, they will feel really, really confident. On the flip side, how does England's batting, which has been a little bit fragile, how do they deal with that powerful South Africa fast bowling unit? It really feels like the match will be won and lost with the fast bowlers taking on the two top orders.
Is that fair, Alex?
Yeah, I do think so. I think South Africa will be silly to underestimate Ecclestone. You know, she's bowled just shy of 70 overs, taken 14 wickets at an average of 15, and that's including that 10 overs for 77 against Australia. So she's an unbelievable bowler, and one that England can turn to at any moment.
I think, what position will South Africa be in when Ecclestone comes on? They will be desperate for Wolfhard and maybe Liz Ali, if they've been really greedy, to still be at the crease. Can they be maximum 1-2 wickets down when Ecclestone and Dean come into the attack? If Charlie Dean plays, she didn't play the last time England played in Christchurch. If they are in that position, they will feel that maybe we can sit on Sophie Ecclestone. We don't really need to push her around for more than 4 and over. We can see her 10 overs off. But if South Africa are 3-4 down when Ecclestone comes into the attack, she will give them nothing. or if they're chasing a big score, how do they attack Sophie Eccleston later in the game? So that, for me, is the key. Can England strike with the new ball, get through the South Africa top order, and then expose the rest to the likes of Eccleston and Charlie Dean?
Well, let's hear from the England camp then. The England captain, Heather Knight, spoke to you, Stefan, just as they were getting on the team bus departing from Wellington to head to Christchurch a couple of days ago, and you caught up with the England skipper there.
Be honest, how stressful have the last couple of weeks been for you personally?
Well, it's been a stressful couple of months, I think. It's been quite a long tour, quite a difficult tour with the Ashes thrown in there as well, but I think I pride myself on trying to stay quite level, whether we're doing well or we're not. I try and stay the same person as much as I can and try and bring that stability. So yeah, it's been stressful. There's been issues, things we've had to change and try and get right, but I think, as I said, after those 3 losses, I think all the things that had gone wrong had been in our control, and that is what made it so frustrating that we were losing, but also something that we could change and something we could make right, which we've done in the last 4 games.
The Ashes and the defeats at the start of this tournament, they count for nothing now. The group stage is gone. Semi-finals, everyone starts equal again. Exactly,
it's a completely fresh slate. It's us versus South Africa and all about what happens on the day. So yeah, we're really excited. We obviously had a really close game and a tough loss against South Africa early in the competition, but really excited for what the final could bring. I think we've really built a little bit of momentum. We're starting to peak, I think. Hopefully at the right time, we're starting to get a few things in place, a few players in form. So yeah, hopefully we can play well.
We've spoken to members of your team over the past couple of weeks. They've spoken a lot about how long you've spent away from home. You left for the Ashes in early January, and this is probably the longest an England women's team has been on tour. Have there ever been times when that time away has almost become not an excuse, but has permeated into performances?
I think that's quite a tough question. I think individuals are battling different things all of the time in international cricket, and I guess no one sees that, and people cope with things differently, being away from home, length of tour, and it's something that's a little bit new for us, and I don't think it's anything that's on our mind and should be an excuse at all. It's just a fact of the world we're living in, and with COVID times we know touring is tough, and it's been the same for a lot of teams. I think it's worth mentioning. A lot of teams around the world have experienced a lot of these things and lived in bubbles and time away from family, etc., and family not being able to come along for stuff. So no, it certainly shouldn't be an excuse, not one that we will use, but I think we're so excited to be in a World Cup semi-final. That's what it's all about. That's got our complete focus, and that's what I have to put all our energy into on Thursday.
Because it's one more week with a really big prize at the end of it.
Hopefully, yeah, we've obviously got to win that first game. I haven't even thought about going home, to be honest. My complete focus has been on the cricket and trying to turn things around and trying to manage myself and manage the team to be in the best place we can.
So I feel like pieces are falling into place at the right time, and I'm not just talking about performances, results here, I'm talking about individuals. So Catherine Brunt took wickets against Pakistan, Danni Wyatt got a much needed score at the top of the order, Sophia Dunkley got a half century against Bangladesh. You've always said it's not about how you start, it's how you finish. Are those pieces of individual performances just coming into place at the right time?
Yeah, I hope so. It feels like a few boxes that need ticking have been ticked in those last couple of games. Catherine in particular, she's almost been a different self, hasn't she? Been her usual bubbly, fiery self, but bowling outstandingly as well, and a few little things. Batters having time in the middle, batters having experience of conditions and winning games of cricket for us, which is really important. So yeah, hopefully we can bring our best on Thursday. Confidence is high obviously after those 4 wins, and we've been playing knockout cricket for 4 games now, so that should be a good mentality to have obviously with that knockout game on Thursday.
And there's still more to come from this team, still room to improve, and like you say, carry on playing knockout cricket like you have been doing for the past 4 games.
Yeah, of course. I think the last 2 wins have been quite cathartic, to be honest. Quite nice, easy wins. Like I said, a few boxes ticked and a few people moving in the right direction. I still think we can get better. Still think there's a few little things we can do. And obviously Thursday, if we can bring it semi-final and make it to that final, I'll be very happy.
That was Heather Knight, the England captain, speaking to Stefan. Alex, I thought it was really interesting the way that Heather said that England have yet to put together everything, but the pieces are starting to come together.
Well, if you look at the way England have won their games, they've not played their best cricket. You know, against New Zealand, they needed 20 runs to win with six wickets in hand and won by 1 wicket. They really did try and lose that game. There's been games where they've batted really well, they haven't bowled very well. That opening game against Australia, you know, chasing down north of 300. They nearly got there, lost by 12 runs. It was, in the field for the first time all winter that let England down. They are starting to piece things together against the West Indies. Their fielding, they'll all admit, was terrible. That's got a lot better. So you sort of feel like they are peaking at the right time, but to beat South Africa in a World Cup semi-final, you cannot afford to make mistakes.
And that's the issue, Stefan, is that as we head towards the latter stages of this tournament, England's room for getting away with errors disappears with every game that goes by.
Absolutely, but England have been in that situation now for 4 games, not least when Anya Shrubsole, the number 11, walked out to bat at Eden Park against New Zealand when England still needed, 8 runs to win? Knowing that if there was a mistake either from Shrubsole or Charlie Dean, England were on their way home. That was a really extreme example of it all, but England still had to put it together against India in the game before that they won, when they rolled India over for 130 odd and then knocked them off, and then still against Pakistan and Bangladesh as well. Pakistan had already beaten the West Indies in this tournament. They went and bowled Pakistan out for 105, and then they were thoroughly professional against Bangladesh on a slow pitch. They racked up 234 for 6 and won by 100 runs. So yeah, it's fair to say that England cannot make any mistakes against South Africa because of the quality of the opposition, but over the past 4 games England have got experience of that, and that will really stand them in good stead.
Alex, when you were part of that side that won in 2017, having lost the first game as they did, you then went on this run and it felt like there was a real momentum with the side. I know you're in lots of contact with the team still. Do you sense that there's a similar momentum?
I think winning always helps. When you're winning and you've had gritty wins like England have had, it really does help you, get into situations. You go, you know what, we've got ourselves out of this situation before, we know what we're doing. And it's the same with losing. When you've lost a few games, you have losing momentum behind you, and you find ways to lose games, which is what we've seen throughout this World Cup with certain teams, what we saw with England in the Ashes. So it's one of those where England have now got 4 wins behind them, 4 wins in 4 different styles for England as well. They've done it in all the ways possible. They've won by 9 wickets, they've won by 100 runs, they've won by 1 wicket. Everything's been really close, or they've won easily. So I sort of feel that gives England confidence going into tomorrow. The fact that they've beaten South Africa before in a semi-final and caused that heartbreak for South Africa will give them confidence. But also they have to take it day by day. Speaking to the camp today, they're very relaxed. They've gone to training, they're very chilled out, they're just doing what they normally would do. They're prepping in exactly the same way, doing exactly the same things, because if you start changing things and saying, well, we need to all train as a team or all do things differently, it's a World Cup semi-final, that's when people start to feel pressure.
I know that we'll touch on the semi-final between Australia and West Indies a little bit later, but West Indies were hammered in Wellington in that semi. West Indies' route to this semi-final was that they only just scraped in on Sunday by virtue of India not beating South Africa. And when we had Stacey Ann King on commentary with us, she told us that she thought the West Indies had their bags packed. It was a game they weren't expecting to play, and then they played like that. They were absolutely dismantled by Australia. For as good as Australia were, West Indies were really poor. Bringing that back to England, Kate Cross on the No Balls podcast this week with Alex said that when they lost to South Africa, she was still on the field and she thought that England were out of this tournament. And now, over the course of those 4 wins, even when we've just spoken to them casually, they believe they can win this tournament. So to go from that position, where they were still on the field and thought they were out, to 4 games later, thinking they can win, how big a turnaround is that, and how big might that be? And all that belief, is that going to give England that extra 10%, that extra 1 wicket, that extra handful of runs when it really gets tight in Christchurch? Because it will. I'd be stunned if this isn't a tight game, because these 2 sides have the potential to be so evenly matched. But the turnaround in their mentality, I think we were told at one point most of them didn't know they could qualify mathematically when they walked off the field after they were beating South Africa in the group stage. So for them to now be thinking we can win the World Cup, and there's also so many of them who actually know what it is like to win a World Cup, having been in the squad 5 years ago against a South Africa team who is about to enter uncharted territory, I think England have a real... it's given them such a boost in their mentality over the past couple of weeks as they've plotted their way towards the semi-finals.
Without wishing to be a bit of a negative Nancy, Alex.
Oh no.
Yes, on one hand, they've been given this second opportunity by virtue of coming back from the position they were. But with that, suddenly comes the, OK, now we've got our chance. This is really pressure for us, doesn't it?
Yeah, of course it does. They're defending champions coming into the tournament. They've got added pressure as it is. You know, they won in 2017. They have the trophy. That comes with its own pressure, and they thought they were out of this competition. Now they're still there at the semi-finals. They've been given a second chance by winning all their games and things going their way. Is it added pressure, or is it a sort of, all right, let's go out and play our best cricket because we could have been going home?
Do you think they have that attitude?
I think they've got a confident attitude. I think they've managed to turn things around. They've had a long old winter, as we keep hearing from the England camp, of games where they keep losing, and they kept finding ways to lose. It was hard for England. Not winning a game in the Ashes, losing the first game in the World Cup was expected, but then to lose the next two was not expected at all from anybody around the world. And to turn things around, and now to have the confidence that they have, I genuinely believe they think that they can win this World Cup.
Look at someone like Catherine Brunt, who for most of this tournament has looked a shadow of herself. In the first 5 games, she took only 1 wicket. We saw her stomping around the outfield. She was kicking at the ground. She was throwing her cap. She was pointing to her head, not being able to understand why she couldn't produce her high standards with the ball. We even saw her in the nets kick her own stumps over after she was bowled in practice the day before the Pakistan game. Pakistan game comes, first ball of the match, Catherine Brunt's got it, bang, takes a wicket. She is transformed before our eyes into the smiling, relaxed Catherine Brunt. Who hasn't seen that clip on social media from that Pakistan game of Catherine Brunt running into bowl, Anya Shrubsole saying, "Stop! Jonesy hasn't got her gloves on," and Brunt has to run back. Oh, I hate extra running. Instantly relaxed. And then again, the Bangladesh game, she was the Catherine Brunt that we know and love. She even felt that she only needed to bowl a handful of overs because the game was won. If Brunt was still struggling for form, you can guarantee that she would have got a full quota in, searching for something, trying to get herself back to her best. And that is just one example of how England have been transformed in a really extreme way, from Catherine Brunt's point of view, basically from one ball.
The winner of the game, in a few hours' time between South Africa and England, has the glorious prospect of a World Cup final. They also have the most enormous mountain in their way, a mountain that is green and gold and Australian, and they've only lost 2 ODIs in 5 years. How are either of these sides, forget England and South Africa and who it's going to be, how is anyone going to beat Australia, Alex? Let's go through that semi-final between them and West Indies. It was an absolute demolition.
I mean, it really was. Going into the game, we knew it was going to be Australia's game, but you just didn't. You thought, could the West Indies do something special? Could they put up a fight of some sort? Well, the answer was no. You know, the answer, Australia scored 305 for 3, and the West Indies sort of walked their way up to 148 for 8.
305 as well, that came in 45 overs because the match was reduced after a bit of rain in the early part of the day. And it's the highest score that's ever been made in a knockout game at a Women's World Cup. I mean, Stefan, this wasn't so much a mark of intent as an absolute show of dominance, wasn't it?
Oh, it was terrifying for whoever plays Australia in the final on Sunday. And if you think that Australia had gone through the group stage with 7 wins out of 7, then turn up to the semi-finals and produce their best performance of the competition without Elise Perry in their side, that gives a real marker of where this Australia team is. If you remember 5 years ago, Australia were dumped out in the semi-finals by India. Now, that wasn't as strong an Australia team as this one is. Back then, England and Australia were sort of seen as on par, and they were on collision course for a final at Lords. In this competition, it is Australia, then a gap, then the rest. But Australia turned up today looking like a side who had that memory of 5 years ago of making that slip up fresh in their minds. And we were all talking about it when the rain arrived in Wellington, when the game was shortened to 45 overs, when the covers were peeled back and it was something like a snooker table underneath there, which we thought, I tell you what, if West Indies win this toss and they put Australia in and it's grey and it's damp and it's green, can their seamers get it right? Can they put Australia under pressure? Absolutely none of it. And that was partly because the West Indies didn't bowl well and they dropped some dollies in the field. But still, Elisa Healy and Rachel Haynes, 216 their partnership was in 32.4 overs, the 5th highest partnership for any wicket in Women's World Cup history. Healy, it was like a highlight reel, the way that she swept and reverse swept and slapped the ball to her all parts. At one point, she took 62 runs from the last 33 deliveries that she faced. It was remarkable batting. And by that point, you know, the game was over at tea, 305 for 3. And then just to put the cherry on top, Beth Mooney, short square leg, Rashada Williams, full-blooded pull off Megan Shute, and Mooney takes the catch of the tournament in a tournament of spectacular catches. For my money, the best one. She hung in the air, flung herself to the right, hanging on in one hand. It was spectacular. The second half of that match was a non-event, except for the brilliance of Beth Mooney.
How does anyone beat Australia, Alex?
I think you have to look at their bowling attack. England were chasing 310 and Australia only won by 12 runs. So England did put their bowling attack under the pump. I think that's the way you go about it. You have to have somebody get a big score. So we saw in that first game, England versus Australia, England's first game of the tournament, Haynes got 130 and nobody else really chipped in for Australia, whereas with England, Nat Siver got 100 and Beaumont got 74 and nobody else scored above 30 runs. So all it takes is for somebody else to go on and get a score, and then you put Australia under the pump. I mean, it's going to be a really tough ask, going to be a really tough game, but it's a final. Anything can happen, no matter who's playing, whether it be South Africa or England. Yes, they're going to go into that game as underdogs, but does that help? They've got nothing to lose. This trophy is already seen around the world as Australia's.
With so much expectation on Australia, it is a little bit of a free hit for whoever gets through.
And I'd love Australia just to bottle it.
You can take the England cricketer out of the squad, but you can never take you away from that mentality.
And all we're hoping for, actually, is just an end to a tournament that befits what we've seen over the past 4 weeks. It's been absolutely brilliant. I think I counted 10 final over finishes in the group stage. So many close games. OK, the first semi-final didn't live up to the billing. That was a mismatch between Australia and West Indies, and that is what we probably expected. But now, England versus South Africa in the semi-final, too close to call. Then whoever gets through to the final, what we really want is a grandstand finish that would be fitting of what has been the best Women's World Cup ever. And there are 2 brilliant games of cricket to look forward to. Let's hope that they can be just as good as what we've seen in the rest of the tournament.